Thank you all for being here this morning. And so I'll try to speak loud and stay close to the microphone. How's that? And so I appreciate it. My name is Chris Woolridge. For those of you who don't know me, I'm an instructor as well as a business consultant with the Byron Fine College of Business at Murray State University. I know that we're taping this for those that can't be here today, so thank you for watching this video and thank you for getting the information that...
you can stand over there. I'm just going to
Awesome, great.
push it over here.
Thank you for watching this video, and thank you for being here this morning as well. So before we start with my presentation, I want to introduce Michael Ashcraft, who's the Senior Area Manager with the Small Business Administration out of Louisville, Lexington, wherever he happens to be, Murray, it doesn't matter. He's all over the place. So Michael's a great friend, has been a great friend for a number of years, and I've always appreciated Mike's support and the hard work that he does in making sure the SBA is in our region and continues to be supportive of our programs and, most importantly, our small businesses and the financial institutions that support our small businesses. So Mike's going to do a presentation to share with you some information, because today is about putting on your radar screens resources, contact information, reaching out to the university, reaching out in terms of other resource partners, and us making connections and making you aware of what's available out there to help industry, small business, workforce, et cetera. And so with that, I'm going to, if you would, join me in welcoming Michael Ashcraft. Thanks for being here, Michael.
Well, Chris is right. We've known each other for over 10 years now, Chris, and done a lot of things together over the years. I started out doing exactly what Chris does in another area of the state and enjoyed it, but came on with SBA back in 2011. So totally different role, but still very related. I've been working one way or another with small businesses since 1999, but most of my career has been either working for or leading small businesses. So I've got a real passion for it. Grew up in an entrepreneurial family, and as anybody who owns a business knows, once it's in your blood, there is no antidote for it. So I admire all the efforts and all of the work that it takes to run a small business, and wanted to just, let me turn this the other way. I was going to be going in reverse with the slides. Do want to thank the Paducah Area Chamber, thank in particular Kelly for getting this together with Chris and me. As I said when we walked in, that was no easy task. We appreciate it, and thank you for coming this morning. Thank the sponsors as well. So I'm going to start off and get your brains thinking, what do these have in common as these businesses that are up on that slide? Didn't know you were going to have a pop quiz, did you?
They're all online.
They're all?
Online.
Online, yep.
They started out as small businesses.
Yes. Anything else?
They all started in someone's garage.
Most of them, yeah. Online, small businesses at one point, started in somebody's garage. You know many or most of those names. There are literally tens of thousands of small businesses like these at one point in their, business life that all started with some kind of assistance through SBA. Look at some of those companies up there. I know you know some of those logos. So the point in this is to drive home the fact that SBA does a lot of things for a lot of businesses. You never know where that next Fortune 500 company is going to come from. You cannot predict. The only thing we do know is that we're there to, through our resource partners like Chris and others who I'll talk about today, to be able to support them through every stage of their business life. And a lot of them never want to get to this size. A lot of them don't want to be nationally known. They love what they do. They want to keep to a certain size, and that's great. That's how most small businesses are. But the point is, you just never know how big they'll become. And the resources that I'll cover this morning can kind of explain how some of these names pop up here. So that being said, SBA exists to help people start, grow, expand, and in some cases, and that's with disasters, to recover their business. We do disaster loans, which I won't really address this morning, but it is something that's tangential to what we do. But we help people, whether it's planning a startup, to launch that business, to grow that business, to ensure that they are growing at the rate they want to in a profitable manner. Bottom line is the bottom line for them. They have to make money at it to stay in business. So that involves really four things that we do. Probably the most important thing, and it's where Chris comes in, because the small business counseling that they provide is crucial. It is absolutely the gem of what we offer through our resource partners, and that would be the Small Business Development Center, SCORE, the Women's Business Center, the Veterans Business Outreach Center, the resource partners that we have like Murray State University and what they do in the entire region. The thing that many people hear about is the loan programs. That is extremely important. You've heard from our lenders this morning in what they do. I'll very lightly touch on the three major loan programs we're involved with. Another thing to think about is government contracting for small businesses and exporting, which are two great ways for existing businesses to grow. And then finally, the advocacy side, and I'll explain what that is in a moment. So, with the loans, the thing that I want to stress more than anything is that the relationship a small business has is really not with SBA. You're welcome to pick up the phone and call me. I talk with a lot of folks, whether it's on the lender side or other areas when it comes to a bank, a credit union, or a nonprofit third party that does SBA lending. The point is your relationship is with your local contact, whether that be through your local bank, through the Purchase Area Development District and the loan programs they do, whether it be through somebody else that has a microloan program, perhaps, or it could be, again, another third party that does either SBA lending or other kinds of lending. You need to be able to explain to them what you do, who you are, why you need the money, et cetera, because those are the kinds of conversations that they take forward when either their loan committee or that group that decides whether to give you a loan to start or expand your business. You've got to have that advocate, and that's the role they play, and that's crucial. We do have loans literally from $500 up to $5.5 million, everything in between. But it's really important to understand the relationship you have is with your local lenders. So build that relationship long before you need it. It's not like speed dating used to be. I mean, it's not, you meet somebody one time and let's get married. The relationship with your lender is let's explain this, and the best time to approach is long before you need to ask them for something, which in most cases is money. So that being said, with the loans, you have to hit some standards, and what I want to do is back up to explain a little bit about small business. In Kentucky, 99.8% of all business in our state is small, and that's pretty typical across the country. That's about 350,000 small businesses. That's about half of all people in the state employed or working for small businesses. So it's a huge sector of small business making up the entire state economy and national economy. Everybody understands the importance of small business. So you have to meet the size standards. That is, you have to be classified as a small business. I've been doing this, as I said, for over 20 years now. I've run into two businesses that were too big, one of which had just grown beyond the size of being a small business, and the other one had merged with another company and threw them over the edge. So there's a very easy, quick way to check. I don't think most people have to worry about that issue, but if you ever do, call me, email me, and I can look it up in about 10 seconds. It's based on either, depending on what industry you're in, how many employees you have, or how much your annual revenue is. And it's as simple as that. So like I said, the odds are very much in your favor that you're going to be a small business for as long as you have your business. We want to make sure you're able to repay the loan. And sometimes the worst thing is to get a loan that you cannot pay back. That is not good for anyone. So the whole idea is to look at it. We want to make sure that you have a solid business plan that explains what you're going to do with the money, how it's going to help your business, whether it's a startup or existing business that's expanding. And by the way, SBA loans, 2/3 of our loans every year go to expanding businesses. And that's about $30 billion a year that we lend out across the country to small business. So what we do is look at cash flow. It's simply like your checkbook at home for personal expenses. How much money's coming in, how much money's going out. At the end of the month, are you at least at or above zero? And if not, that's an issue. So what SBA does is ensures that you're not getting into a situation where it's next to impossible to pay back the loan. Nobody wins in that situation. It's not good for you, it's not good for the lender. So there are a lot of times where what we do is we will change the loan parameters. And again, we don't lend the money directly to you. It's through your local bank, your local credit union, the PAD, or somebody else that does SBA loans. And what we do is provide a guarantee on the back end for that loan, kind of like an insurance policy. So what we're trying to do is ensure that you have enough money to be successful and you're not taking on too little or too much for whatever project it is you're working on. So we look at the cash flow situation for your business. There's an example, the two major loans we do. Don't worry about it other than the fact that those two, that's about 90% of everything we do every year is either the 7A loan, which is done through banks and some credit unions. And that is pretty typical. They'll lend for just about anything, whether it's working capital, whether it's inventory, it could be in something else that you have some other expenses as you're expanding, say to a third location. You know, it could be for any kind of circumstance. And then there's a very specialized loan called the 504 loan that is done only for land, building, and durable equipment, 10 years or more on that equipment. So understand that you don't even have to know exactly which program it is, just know that there are funds to do just about anything for your business, and the folks who you'll work with will figure out and help you figure out what the better program or the best program is to go with. And Chris Wooldridge, he'll talk a little bit about that, and they will look at what's the best program, whether it's SBA, USDA, DRA, or other funds. They'll assess what fits best for what your project is. So again, just think that there is probably a bucket of money that fits your project, and talking it over with some folks on the lending side, they'll help you figure out which program's the best. Typically on a 7A loan, it goes up to, most of the time, no longer than 7 or 10 years. The 504 loan on land and building, it's a 20-year fixed rate, or 25 years in some cases fixed rate on land and building. And at today's interest rates, that's very attractive for these kinds of projects, locking in historically low rates. So the other end of the spectrum is called the microloan program. That's where we can do loans as small as $500 up to $50,000. What's interesting about that loan program, it was a gap in the market back in the 1990s where we realized sometimes it's harder to borrow less money, or there are a lot of situations where somebody doesn't have sterling credit, or maybe they just don't have enough of a credit history. So the microloan program was designed to fill that gap in the market and provided technical assistance for those who needed it, and worked real well. Now what a lot of folks are using that program for, professionals, if they're working at a law practice and decide to start their own business or maybe some other profession, they don't need a lot of money, they're not going to buy a building, they don't have inventory, but they need, let's just say, $35,000. Sometimes it's very difficult to borrow without a lot of collateral or a lot of history, money like that, so the microloan program fits the bill pretty well with that too. So let's get into the other thing, and some of the businesses that were in that slide that showed who they were, whether it's Apple or FedEx or some of the other companies. Many of them got some kind of SBA assistance through a grant, but grants, we only have two real well-known grant programs. One of them is called SBIR. That's Small Business Innovation Research. And as you're thinking about some of the companies that were in that second slide, that might make sense, because what happens, and this is about $2 to $3 billion a year that small businesses get these grants. It's very specific through federal agencies that put out a grant proposal. So you're competing with anybody else that's looking at these grant proposals. Typically, they're only offered once or twice a year. The first grant, typically called Phase 1, is a grant with a federal agency that says, okay, we're from the Department of Defense and we want you as a company to put in a bid on fill in the blank kind of research. Oftentimes it's 6 months, maybe a little longer. Oftentimes it's 150,000, maybe a little more, a little less. So you don't go to the government and say, here's what I want to do with the money. They put that out, what they want research done on. That's why it's called Small Business Innovation Research. A lot of the tools and technology we're accustomed to now came through these kinds of programs back 5, 10, 20 years ago. Whether it's your laptop, your any other communication device, a lot of these sorts of things that we take for granted now had university-based research where they got funding. So phase 1 was proof of concept. Phase 2 is to scale it up. That phase 2 grant can go upwards, typically $250,000 and maybe a little higher than that. And oftentimes 18 months to 2 years long to prove the concept can grow. And then phase 3 is start a business from it, spin it off, and be able to have it as a standalone business. So that's how a lot of these companies got started from the grant program. Tech transfer is related to that. That's where universities oftentimes have some very specific technology. They haven't commercialized it yet. They're not in the business of that. So this allows the universities or others that have this kind of innovative products or knowledge to be able to turn those into companies as well. So that's the bulk of the grants we do. The other one is for expansion into other countries, exports, and those are small grants, typically a few thousand to $5,000, $6,000 to help a small company get into another market overseas. That could be Canada, Mexico, Europe, Australia, you name it, that's where a lot of these companies go. But it's for very specific things like taking your marketing materials and translating them into other languages, maybe going to a conference or trade show in another country. And those are the two kinds of programs we deal with on the grant side. So it's very narrowly focused and very limited, but there are some opportunities there. So I mentioned the real jewel of what we do through the counseling services, and Chris will talk more about that. We've got all these resources listed up here. I mentioned some of them, Small Business Development Centers, the Women's Business Center, SCORE, which does more long-term mentoring. We also have Export Assistance Centers, which ties back to the exporting programs for small business. By the way, did you all know that Kentucky ranks #1 almost every year in export growth, has for about 9 years now? If you didn't know it, stop and think about that. How are we doing that? We're not located next to Canada or Mexico. We're not along the ocean. How are we able to consistently grow exporting in our state? They had programs at the state level back in the 80s and 1990s that really focused on that. That combined with programs like what we and others do really enable small businesses to tap into 96% of the world's population outside of the U.S. Most of those folks want American-made products and services. So it's a huge opportunity to be able to expand business markets. Okay, so this is just a quick map that shows you the resources all across the state. And Chris knows pretty much everything, and he'll talk some more about all these resources. But if you ever have any questions about something else that's tangential to what we have in the resource guide that's laid out there, dives into each of them. We don't even really have the time to talk about things like surety bonding that SBA does for government contracts if you can't get bonding. And sometimes it's that chicken or egg. If I get a contract, I need bonding. But without bonding ahead of time, I can't get a contract. But without the bonding, you know, it just, what comes first? So SBA fills that gap too if you have a difficulty getting bonding for, most government contracts require a bond. So there are lots of other things that the SBDCs, SCORE, Women's Business Center, Murray State University itself can do when it comes to research, financial forecasting and analysis, and other things they can do. And he'll talk quite a bit about that, but it's some incredible resources. It's confidential, it's free, it's extremely high quality. So I mentioned earlier about government contracting. Every year, it's over $100 million that the federal agencies spend just with small business. Think about that, over $100 million. Last year was over $125 billion. I said million a moment ago. $125 billion that federal agencies spend with small business. They're looking for small businesses for these contracts. You need to get certified. There's a process for that. We've got folks who specialize in that that can help you getting through that certification process, the parameters, what they look for, how you can search for opportunities, how you can compete on bids. It's, you know, it's pretty heady stuff, but the opportunities are very good once somebody kind of cracks that nut the first time. So in addition to federal government, state, local government, school systems, you've got corporations all looking for small business contracts that they can partner with these businesses at the local levels. So again, a great opportunity for businesses to grow the revenue side. I mentioned earlier about exporting, and again, it's all free. The assistance that we and others can provide to help explore and perhaps tap into the exporting market around the world. So, the last thing I'll hit on is advocacy. SBA does a lot of that, and actually it's what I do that I enjoy the most, because that's where we do things like the Small Business Week every May, where we highlight our Small Business Person of the Year. That person from each district goes to Washington, D.C. and competes. And we've had some great representatives over the years. In fact, 2 years ago, our small business person from Kentucky came in number 2 nationally as Small Business Person of the Year. Some other great stories. I know we've got some here, and I'm making a pitch for it right now with the Chamber to think about it. We start taking nominations in December and early January for Small Business Awards, and we also do Small Business Saturday in conjunction with American Express, and a lot of other things just to highlight those great success stories. I've rattled off a few statistics, whether it's state level or national level. That's something else. SBA goes every spring, goes through the process of updating by district, or in our case, entire state level statistics when it comes to small business. Interesting stuff, and that's something else that we do. And then also, we are there to help push back on regulatory burdens, the federal agencies with new laws in how it impacts small business. So that is something at the national level that we're dealing with, and we've had some folks coming from Washington in Kentucky on listening tours to hear what those impacts might be if they go through with a particular law and how it's going to affect your business. So it's a good opportunity to, you know, be able to speak to the folks that are pushing back on those regs. So that being said, I'll take just a moment or two for questions and allow Chris to get up here and talk about all the things they do with Murray State. Any question? Yes, sir.
Is the grant you're referencing for exporting, is that the STEP grant?
Yes, that's a STEP grant, State Trade Expansion Program, or STEP grant, and the state runs that through the Cabinet for Economic Development. So they do those grants, you apply through them. That's a national funding process that goes through to each state. So you're aware of that? Have you applied for it?
Yes.
Okay. Were you successful?
Yes.
Good. Okay, glad to hear that. All right. Chris?
Success story, we may want to grab that.
There you go. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mike. Let's give Mike a thanks applause. I appreciate Mike being here. When I talked to Mike last week, he mentioned that he was going to be in the area, and I said, nobody presents your program better than you, so I want to be sure that we connected him with us at this opportunity. Because it's a far drive from Louisville to West Kentucky, but Mike makes it willingly and on a regular basis, so I appreciate that. We're going to try to be conscientious of time, and we're going to try to get you out of here at 9 o'clock. And I first obviously want to thank the Chamber as well, thank Terry Leonard for her support, and also want to thank F&B as well. I am not going to get any bonus points for my PowerPoint this morning. So if you expect really bright colors and really short sections in the PowerPoint, I would give myself a D- right now. But what I hope to get is at least maybe a B+ on putting on your radar screen contacts, because that's really what I wanted to do this morning, was kind of talk about the university, kind of what we're providing, but also making sure that there's some awareness out there of the different programs and the different organizations that we partner with, because that's some of the biggest challenge I get is, who do we call? who do you guys work with at a university? How do you support this or that particular initiative? And so the idea really here this morning, and in this almost a novel of a PowerPoint that I've handed out, is really to make you aware and put on your radar some things. So a little bit about the university simply from the standpoint of what we're trying to do is make sure that we're connecting the community with the classroom and the classroom with the community, and doing it in such a way that supports job creation and wealth creation in our region. And so we work with a ton of different organizations. So if you look at number 2, we work with obviously our chambers of commerce, our economic development organizations throughout West Kentucky, through any organization really that's going to advance small business, industry, workforce, job creation, and wealth creation, and our area development districts, of which we appreciate Mike being here from the Purchase Area Development District. So I'm going to encourage you, for those of you, as you look through this packet and as we blow through a lot of slides and kind of make you aware of these folks, is to go to their websites. Obviously SBA.gov to catch what Mike's taking, go to the Purchase website as well, and pull some information from there as well. So what we're trying to do as a university is really look at what we can provide you. Look at what we can provide you from the investment that our communities have made in our university, and be that economic engine, be that activist and catalyst for job growth, for workforce assistance. And so what we see in the area are these services that are necessary for that success. And so we look for what can we do internally. How can we connect classrooms? How can we connect instructors and opportunities with businesses that are great fits on an academic front, but also how can we leverage that into having that positive impact on the economy in the region? Because how our region goes economically is how we all go, personally as well as professionally. And so these are some of the things that we look for, or some of the services that we look to provide either internally through our relationship with you at the university, or looking for those strategic partners and those resources that we can bring and keep in the region. And so these are some of our partners. I quit putting logos on because I started to go into the second page, and I'm already at maybe 100 pages on this PowerPoint. So, but I did want to mention some of these folks that are going to be actually, I'm going to present to you in the PowerPoint itself. So one of these you'll notice is the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development. And one of the things that I get asked quite a bit is, what does the cabinet offer? And so I've taken this opportunity to kind of put in each of these slides these different programs. And this is a PowerPoint that Marilyn at the cabinet sent me. It kind of blurred out, and that's my fault. Again, I'm not going to get any A's for the PowerPoints. But what I want to talk about very briefly, and so that you can take notes on your PowerPoint sheets that I've handed out, is, hey, this is a program I might want to come back and look at later, or we may want to delve more into. And so there is a tax credit program that the cabinet offers. I encourage you to go to the website and kind of pull this up, but this is under the KSBDC, TC, where we actually have tax credit. I get tons of questions. Is there a tax credit? Yes, there are tax credits, and this is one of the most utilized and available ones in the cabinet. So this is under the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development. If you're interested in that, there are some guidelines that have to be followed, and the amounts of that credit are driven by a particular business's parameters, okay? And so I won't bore you with 30 minutes of those qualifications and those requirements, but I did want to put those out there and make you aware of that. The cabinet has the KSBCI, which is the Kentucky Small Business Credit Initiative, okay? And they are from, and we're on page 3, sorry, we're already through 3 pages, see? And so we'll leave some time for the test afterwards, so if you want to make notes on that, please feel free to do that. This is an initiative through the cabinet to reduce the risk of lenders, encourage lending, and support businesses in their startups. So one of those is the Kentucky CAP program. And the Kentucky CAP program, as you can see in your slide, this offers some loan assistance, some portfolio assistance, where some money is added by the cabinet to the bank to encourage a loan by setting aside some loan loss provisions. And so it reduces some of that risk to the lender. And so much of what we try to do in small business and industry and et cetera is working with those lenders to help them reduce the risk. It's not that we don't have lenders that want to play. It's not that we don't have financiers that want to get involved. It's that we have to help mitigate that risk or manage that risk. And so a lot of these programs are designed to do that, to help mitigate that risk. This is one of those where the Kentucky State program will actually put in some matching contributions to help the bank from a loan loss perspective in case there is a loss. And that's something realistically that our banks have to take into consideration. They have to underwrite that. Their federal regulators are looking for that addressment. So we have to make sure that we're helping them do that. The Kentucky Loan Participation Program, this is actually, if you had to take a note on the side of your slide, this is a set aside of some of that debt where we may have a borrower from the bank's perspective that has a high debt to income or cash flow becomes pretty tight. And so if we can take some of that debt kind of off the books or at least off of a debt service, a servicing position through 12 months, 24 months, it provides a grace period. And so that can ease cash flow, which improves some of the bank's underwriting criteria, and the bank can manage that risk a little bit better and justify that deal. And so we might want to look at that program too if we're looking at a deal that is kind of tight on cash flow and we've got some debt to income. If we can take a portion of that off for a short period of time and allow that to be done. Another program through the Kentucky Cabinet is the Collateral Support Program. And this is where the Cabinet actually puts some collateral up for a deal. A lot of our deals that we're looking at, a lot of small businesses start and we don't have a tremendous amount of collateral available. Obviously, the SBA has tremendous programs, and we look at those. Another option is where the Cabinet comes in and pledges some cash to a lender, actually puts that money in a bank and pledges that toward that security. So we may have a program that meets all the other underwriting criteria, debt to income, projections look good, et cetera, et cetera. We're just thin on collateral, and that puts the bank in a situation with its examiners. So this is a situation where we're able to address that and help the bank underwrite that loan. So Kentucky also has a Kentucky Export Initiative. And I don't think it's any news to anyone that we operate in a global society. We operate in selling stuff next door, but to the next country or around the globe. And so we don't want to leave a lot of our market, if that is our market, untapped. And so Kentucky has pushed for a number of years now the Kentucky Export Initiative and has seeded some programs in there to assist that. One of those is a STEP grant, which Mike mentioned. I won't go into detail on that, but that's a grant program that we should be looking at. If got a great success story there, maybe he can share some information with us later, but looking at those programs from the standpoint of making those trade expansion initiatives work through the STEP program is key. And so if you're a company that's looking for expanding into that, we definitely want to be aware of that program. Another program that the Cabinet has instituted is the RISE program, which is the Regional Innovation for Startup and Entrepreneurs. This is replacing the Kentucky Innovation Network, which started in 2012, I think, or maybe somewhere around in there. Cabinet backed up, looked at the effectiveness and said, let's kind of rebalance this thing a little bit. And so what the Cabinet has done since then is push some money out to regional universities, to regional organizations, and basically focus on how we support innovative entrepreneurship. We've had some great successes here in Paducah through this program. Sprockets has been one of the success stories here, and we've really been excited about year two on how we expand this program. The university took lead the first year and has been working with the Tech Council in West Kentucky to really drive an innovation component, a focus on innovation and how we look at those next, as Mike had up on his slide, who's going to be that next Apple? Are we going to find that one? We sure don't want to leave that one on the table if it shows up. And if we want it to come from Paducah or West Kentucky, we want to make sure that we find that. And so looking at from a regional standpoint, this covers Henderson, Madisonville, Hopkinsville, Paducah, And really the idea also is not just how do we find those entrepreneurs or those innovations that we can help support, but how do we make that network? How do we create that network? What's going well in Massillville? Can we rip off and duplicate it and bring it to Paducah? What's going on in Hopkinsville? Can we bring that to Henderson? How can we support the region? And so the RISE program is a great networking and a great opportunity focusing on that innovation assistance. Mike spent some time talking about the SBIR and the STTR, so I'm not going to spend a lot of that, and I'm sure you can't read that, but we're going to make sure the PowerPoints are available also to you as well, so you'll be able to pull that up. So I'm going to skip through these couple of slides since Mike's kind of already touched base on those. Kentucky Innovation Investment Program, we're all about acronyms in the state. Have you noticed that? We've gone through a few slides, and we're already loaded up with acronyms. Excuse me. What I'd like to say that, just briefly, as a note to the side of your slide, this is assistance to help you get those grants, okay? So when we're talking about the SBIR, we're talking about assistance through this KIIP in helping you get those, because these are pretty easy to get, right, Mike? They're not really competitive, they're not hard to get, there's not a lot of paperwork, is that right? No, they're pretty difficult. And so what Kentucky said was, let's get some assistance out there. And if you will see that this initiative was supported in part by SBA. Mike wrote a personal check, and then SBA matched that check and invested in, no, I'm kidding. But SBA supported this program for that exact reason. How do we drive that interest into those grant programs that help? And there aren't a whole lot of grant programs out there. We at the university and through our partners with SBDC and others, we're always getting calls. I need a grant, I need a grant, I need a grant. Well, there are just not a lot of grants out there. A lot of grants are focused on those areas and those developments that are not typically funded by our typical traditional commercial lending, rather. If there is a market out there for lending, then those limited grant dollars aren't going to be focused where normal lending can be done, where normal capital can be acquired. Where typically grant funding is seen as those areas that are on cutting edge, where risk can't be priced, where risk can't be measured, and so there's not a whole lot of lending out there. There's not a whole lot of debt options out there. And so when we look for grants, these are the kind of areas that we're looking for under these grant programs. So take advantage of these when we can in fact find those. I want to talk real quickly about USDA, okay? Sometimes we don't think about USDA as supporting small businesses and industries. It's key. Mike Maxwell up front has dealt with USDA as well. In addition to SBA, a lot of the programs are working through the Purchase Area Development District since they're licensure to do that. And so sometimes we talk about USDA and people go, well, I'm not in ag. Well, let's talk about kind of what's out there and it's available. A couple of different programs that I'm going to mention this morning, and these are programs that our contact here at USDA and then our friend in Bowling Green, Robbie Fauser-Fink, works with. When I was in lending, in banking, we worked with B&I guarantees all the time, okay? And so when we look at business and industry guarantees, we're not necessarily just talking about, do I do row crops? We're looking for businesses that function in rural areas with populations of less than 50,000. Well, if you think of West Kentucky, and by that I mean the real West Kentucky, this side of the state past Highway 431, right? That's what I tell my friends on the other end of the state. You know, you got to cross 431 to get into real West Kentucky. You know, we're talking about funding that's available through SDA in rural areas, less than 50,000 of population, for acquisition, startup, expansion of businesses that create rural employment, okay? And in some cases, we're not even involved in agriculture. Sometimes we're talking about deals that are creating employment in rural areas. Lender and borrower negotiate terms, so there's some discussion there about how banks interact with USDA on business and industry deals. We're not going to get into that, but be aware that that is another resource out there for us to consider. Here's some examples that they sent us, and I'm just going to put these up real quick. 80% guarantees on 50 million or less, 70% on 50 to 10 million, 60% guarantee loans on 10 to 25. Folks, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of, go ahead.
Does McCracken County qualify for that?
Yes, it's statewide. Go ahead.
I was just going to add, if anybody's interested in this program, I have documentation in my office to help them get signed up for it.
Awesome, great. So if you didn't hear that, Mike Maxwell at the Purchase Ad has the information and can get you signed up for that program. Yeah, it's great. And we've worked with them as a university through the years. We work, again, another contact that we had that we try to make sure is in the region. Mike, thanks for bringing that up, mentioning that. So, and you can kind of see the things that we're looking at here. Real estate, obviously it's funding real estate acquisition, machinery and equipment, working capital, et cetera. So again, not to go into a all-encompassing discussion about B&I, but we should be aware of that. We should understand sometimes the USDA is not thought. USDA and SBA sometimes works together on these kinds of projects, and we look. So definitely want to look at those kinds of things. Benefits to the lender, again, our number one goal from assistance is making sure that we've got a lender who can get to yes. Okay, how do we get them to yes to funding that small business, funding that industry need? How do we get there? Well, we do that by showing positive cash flow, risk reduction, following within federal guidelines and the world that they have to live in. And so that's what this program assists in doing. REAP, Rural Energy for America program rather. I put some information in your slide about that. Provides grants and guarantee loans for renewable energy systems and energy efficient improvement projects. And so you're smiling about REAP.
I also have
Tons of information on that. So
grant writers.
again, another resource. Mike's going to be speaking next year at this time on his own hour. So we're excited about Mike coming next year to talk about it. But yes, and that's the purpose of the Area Development District, is to make these programs assistant.
I think it's important to note that USDA has been in the region within the last 2 months to promote these programs as well. So it's kind of a hot button topic for them to get the information out there.
It's on their radar, it's dead center, and they're pushing it. So this would be a great time that if we see interest, if we have interest in that, get in touch with Mike, get in touch with me. Let's figure out how we make that happen. There's a listing for eligible projects. I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time going through those. I'll let you review those. There are some grants available. Can't exceed 25% of the eligible costs. And again, I'm going to let you kind of look through that. Guaranteed limits, that's in your packet as well. Again, the idea here is that that guarantee agency comes in and helps reduce that risk, not eliminate that risk to the bank. And so we're not going to do 100%. USDA is not going to come in and do 100%. SBA is not going to come in and do 100%. Our clients, you, the small businesses, are going to have some investment in that. The bank's going to have some investment in that from a risk standpoint. These programs are designed to help seed those where the grants are needed, but also help reduce that risk so those banks can get to yes. There's some application information there. April 30th of 2019, we're probably past that unless we can do time travel. The third one I'll just mention is the Value-Added Producer Grant Program, and this provides some grant funds for agricultural products to producers for activities or working capital expense as they look at customers' value-added products. This is a very good program. Again, I don't know if Robbie's been in pushing that one very much. Yeah, and so from again, another grant program that might be more of a rifle shot toward our agricultural producers than it checks all the boxes for all of our producers, but we definitely want to be aware of that and discuss that. Here's some eligibility. So we're looking at our independent producers, farmers and ranchers. Planning activities. So we're looking at grant programs that may look at feasibility studies for our producers, and also those that may need some working capital for some of those items listed below. So I put Robbie's contact information in there and the website information as well. And so if you're interested in any of those programs, feel free to reach out to her directly. Feel free to give me a contact or give Mike a contact. Okay? So we're coming in the home stretch here. Still got a ton to do. Murray State University has been a partner with and in the KSBDC network for a number of years. We started in the Kentucky Small Business Development Center network in 1981. We have stepped back away from the network, but are continuing to be partners with them and continue to work with them simply for the purpose of making sure that we've got those resources coming to our region. And so I put a slide in there to share some information with you on them. One of the things that I always mention about the SBDC is those companies that work with us in the SBDC have a huge leg up on those that don't. And part of that is we're putting those materials, those resources, and that information in our small businesses' hands. but also we're able to consult with them and provide them with guidance and helping them primarily through business plan assistance. And those business plans in and of themselves take a lot of the questions and the surprises out of starting a business or operating a business or expanding a business. And so we continue to partner with them, and we're very excited about the future with them. K-Card, this is another state program. I don't know if you're familiar with K-Card. This is the Kentucky Center for Agriculture and Rural Development. We started off with some discussions about the Kentucky Cabinet, okay, and now we've delved a little bit into agriculture. For those of you who may not be familiar with it, agriculture is a huge portion of our economic area. You know, you drive from, I drove this morning from Murray and looking at corn and looking at soybeans that are ready and looking at all the agricultural aspects of our community. The agricultural industry in West Kentucky is super important. And so how that agricultural area goes, how that agriculture industry goes, rather, is how we go as well. And so from this particular area, well, it looks like my slide crammed there. Sorry about that. We have worked with a number of projects out of the university with our K-Card contacts and our folks. And in many of the specialized areas of agriculture, we bring in some specialists that really understand the discussion of row crops and livestock, as well as the things that maybe not necessarily as normal as we're used to, like Asian carp, okay? And so our programs and the things that they can bring in through K-Card are key. Okay, Alita Botts is the leader of that. We've worked with her. In fact, we've got 3 projects right now we're working with K-Card to try to get some funding for. One thing I would mention about K-Card is K-Card also assists when we go for agricultural financing through the Kentucky Agricultural Department. They're willing to assist us in developing those business plans and helping those plans get ready when they're submitted to those state agencies that are considering that application for funding. And Alita does a great job, and her team does a great job on those agricultural industry applications and putting those together. I apologize for that slide. I'm sure it's something I did wrong, but I will get you a cleaned up slide for that. Let's talk about exporting real quick. One of our partners is the Kentucky World Trade Center, which has offices in Louisville and Lexington. This is a tremendous, tremendous resource. Their number one goal is to assist businesses be successful globally, okay? So as an example, I have a client that we started working with about 5 years ago, got them growing regionally. They grew in the state, got multi-state, and then decided they wanted to go international. We connected them with the World Trade Center, and they actually received funding. I don't know if I put that on there. No. They received funding through their guidance to go to a trade show in Argentina. And so the World Trade Center orchestrated that, made the connections, got them into Argentina. They presented their what they do, and they opened up a market in Argentina. From there, they ended up in China, England, and I forget the other country. But by connecting them, we have folks that understand getting our Kentucky folks in other countries and help with that trade assistance in how to approach those other countries' businesses, how to make those connections, and how to prepare them for dealing in those other countries, China being a very huge country that we have a lot of interaction with. The World Trade Center of Kentucky joins the Kentucky Cabinet and other organizations in traveling around the world in supporting the small businesses that are their clients and supporting Kentucky. There have been many trade missions to Canada, Cuba. There's some work that the World Trade Center is doing in Cuba to open up our markets there for Kentucky corn and chicken. And so if you're interested in that, we definitely want to put them on your radar screen. Sherry Mulkins, good friend of mine, in fact, texted her this morning and made sure that I had her information in my PowerPoint for you. So she can be reached at that phone number, or you may drop her an email. Of course, Murray State is continuing to invest in international trade as well. And so the Center for International Trade was started soft opening a couple of years ago. It's located here at the Paducah campus. And the idea is very clear. If you're interested in international business and trade, This is our vision and this is our mission. How are we as a university expanding and making sure that we're providing the support necessary for those businesses in the region to be ready to go international, and those that are ready to go international, how can we bring the resources both from the university as well as from our resource partners into that? Online for you and for the businesses, we've worked with a couple of businesses that have done very well in us getting them prepared to hand off to the World Trade Center so that they're ready then to go international. So again, it's all about the partnerships. How are we continuing to provide those innovations, to take those innovations and get those to market? I think this is the last one I'm going to mention. Let me make real sure. If you're not familiar with CAM, CAM is the Kentucky Association of Manufacturers in the state. CAM is a tremendous resource. I'm going to put the other slide up. There we go. Manufacturing has been and continues to be one of the largest economic engines for Kentucky. And so making sure that support is going to those manufacturers wherever they are in their life cycle is key. Lee Lingo is the director of that. Lee was the chamber director in Madisonville, again, another good friend of ours. He was here Monday for ribbon cutting for the Hempwood manufacturing plant in Murray that's kicking off. Anything manufacturing Lee wants to know about. He loves West Kentucky. He's one of our own. He comes from our region, and he's running CAM. And so we want to get him in this area as much and as often as we can. And so if we've got manufacturers out there that are looking for assistance, we want to make sure that connection's made. So I put his information there, his contact, email, and his telephone number. And so I have got 4 minutes left. I can't believe I got it all done. Oh, sorry, almost walked away from the microphone. So that's a lot of information, okay? And I know I stumbled through it quite a bit. But the idea here, I think, is not necessarily how well I present to you, but what I present to you. And so I wanted you to leave here, having come to this chamber event, with contact information, an idea of what's out there with some of our largest partners and resource providers. So with that, we've got a few minutes for questions. I know we want to be conscientious of time as well. So what questions do you have for me or for either Mike? Because I think either Mike would be ready to take other questions as well.